Hello. We're going to continue our discussion on federal lawmaking and rulemaking process. So we started last week. We're going to get a little bit in depth on how the process works at the federal level, and also show you some of the resources you can look at to discover some of the rules that affect your areas. As we've talked about in the past, Congress is the responsible party for creating and instigating lawmaking in the United States. These are for federal laws as opposed to state laws. This process can either start in the House or in the Senate. So when you hear people talk about maybe the president writing a law or Supreme Court writing a laws, those are two different parts of the lawmaking process. Either the House or the Senate are the only ones that actually can write laws at the federal level. So the process for a law starts off with an elected official in either the House or the Senate introducing a bill on the floor. Once it's introduced, it's a proposed law at that moment, it gets assigned to a committee. The committees will they'll meet and discuss the proposed law. They'll make changes. There's a lot of research conducted during that process. They'll suggest changes to the proposal, and then they'll vote on it. And you've seen some of these committee hearings in the news where senators from both Republican and Democratic parties will be discussing the merits of a new piece of legislation going through. Once they've made all the proposed changes to the rule, they will vote to send it back to the chamber that it originated from. There, it's debated again by the full either House or Senate, and it comes up for a vote. And if approved, it then goes to the other side of Congress. So if this started in the House, it would go to the Senate, and it starts the process all over again. It goes to committee, it gets researched, it gets debated, it gets sent back out to the floor, it's finally voted on. Once both the House and the Senate have voted on a version of this proposed law, there will be another committee formed between the two houses, the two chambers, called a reconciliation committee. That's where they compare the two versions. They make sure that they're either aligned. They make the two bills similar. They send them back to their respective houses. They're voted on the last time. Once those things have been voted on, it gets sent to the president for the president's signature or veto. Generally speaking, that is the lawmaking process. Laws are published in the US Code. So once they're finally finished, you can go out and search them and read the text for the US in the official US Code. And the link that I have here, that's also in the materials section in this week's class, is a link to the US Code. We can go there right now. And you can see this is the general US Code that you're accessible. The various laws that deal with parts of the government are divided into separate titles. You can search these. So we could go here to banks and banking. You can open up this section. You can download PDF versions of this, read the text, see details, read parts of the code. And you can have even sub-chapters such as the Federal Reserve System, which has its own table of contents and its own sub-chapters, and you can really dig down into the official published laws of the United States. So after the law has been published, it next goes to the regulatory agencies for rulemaking. So the executive agencies or departments, U.S. Department of Education, Department of Interior, they will get a copy of the official law that's been published And they'll first determine whether or not a new regulation or rule has to be written. It could be that an existing regulation has to be changed to come into alignment with the law. If a new rule is required, they will publish a notice in the Federal Register, which is a different publication, that there is a new rule that's being promulgated, and it's asking for public comment. They'll give a time limit for how long they're going to have comments open for, and anyone from the public, interest groups, citizens can submit comments on the proposed rule. Once the comment period's closed, the agency will take all of those comments. They will have to consider the comments that have been submitted. They will probably group comments that are similar, so they don't have to group each individual comment. You can get into the thousands and certain regs that are proposed. They will revise it as needed. They will approve it. They'll go through their process in their agency, and then they will publish the final rule in the Code of Federal Regulations. So again, this link is in your materials section. This is the official Federal Register. So you can see here with the current issue as of this date, they've published 103 documents for this week. You have notices, 6 proposed rules. Here you have 20 rules that have been finalized and 2 significant documents. We go to the notices. These are different notices for meetings. Proposed rules, you can go here. We can click on any of these, where you can see here, you'll have a summary, the agency that's involved, the dates here. You can see that this proposed rule, they're accepting comments on or before December 2nd. And just general information on this. On certain rules, just so that you know, if you do go through the comment process, your comments are public, so people can read what you have said. This is not an anonymous process for public comment. So another part of the process is the Supreme Court. And they're, as we've talked previously, are responsible for reviewing the constitutionality of laws. They have, and you've probably noticed in the past few weeks, that certain laws have been struck down based on their constitutionality. They can't act as their own body. They can't influence on their own. They can't decide to take action on a law. They must have a case presented to them. And that case is somebody who is directly impacted by the law that has been passed, adversely impacted or something along those lines. That person has to have standing. For example, at the time of this video, we've just recently had an executive action on student loan forgiveness. There have been a number of elected officials who were seeking to overturn that executive action because they said it was unconstitutional. The only problem was none of them could do that. None of them were affected by the student loan forgiveness. They had to wait for someone who had standing, someone who would have been affected, someone who had a student loan and was willing to sue the federal government in order to overturn this. And they had to find somebody who felt like they needed to, they were going to have adverse effects. The person who brought the case that happened in the last 2 weeks brought the case based on the fact that he was going to have a tax penalty. So he felt that he could sue based on that. So that's one of the key pieces is that the person has to have standing. The other half is the Supreme Court does not have to take the case up. They can choose to ignore Supreme Court cases. They'll tend to take the cases that have some sort of significant legal or constitutional principle that needs to be explored. So when you hear people talk about they're going to take a case to the Supreme Court, they're probably not taking a case to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has to agree that there's a constitutional issue that at play, and they're willing to accept it. And typically, you have to have 4 Supreme Court justices agree that this case needs to be taken on by the court. So generally, that's a extremely quick and high level discussion on how laws get created at the federal level. So for this week, we're still reading chapters 3 to 4 in Rinfret. We're still reading Pennock chapters 5 to 7. You have a discussion post. You have a chapter 3 quiz this week, and you have an assignment, the 4th assignment for policy argument and solutions this week. I believe I fixed the issues. Anytime that you see a quiz or an assignment in the assessment section of your course, those are the ones that are due for that week. You don't need to go through the other links if that's going to be confusing. So just make sure you go into that section and you'll see the assignments that are due for this week. If you have any questions, you can always email me, and I will have my office hours open again on Thursday if you need me. Any other time you need me, if you want to set up a time to talk, let me know and we'll set up a time outside of the office hours. And I hope to see what you have for this week. Thank you very much.